Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Voices of Sustainability virtual fireside chat series. I'm Mark Lee. I'm the executive director of the ERM Sustainability Institute. The institute inside of ERM is focused on the role of the private sector in sustainable development. We do research that looks at what companies can do to help move the sustainable development agenda faster and at greater scale. The Zayed Sustainability Prize is the organizer and the power behind the Voices of Sustainability chat series. For those of you who might be new to the series, I just want to introduce the prize itself. It was established in 2008 as the United Arab Emirates Pioneering Global Award to recognize organizations and high schools, which I think is a great twist, for their sustainable, innovative, and humanitarian solutions. Over 16 years, these things are hard to track, but the prize believes it's touched 384 million people somehow with all of the work of their winners. And the winners come with solutions in multiple categories: health, food, energy, water, climate action, and global high schools, the work of the next generation coming up. The prize and the chat series cover lots of topics. Today, we're going to key in on the issue of plastic pollution, something that all of us kind of participate in, unfortunately, but that is very top of mind, very visible, very visceral for folks these days because the challenge is so great. I have two fantastic panelists to explore this with, and just like to introduce them briefly, and then mostly you're going to hear from them the rest of the way instead of me. So first off, I want to introduce Gonzalo Munoz. He's actually so many things. Long list coming up. He's the co-founder of Ambition Loop, Manuia, Sistema B, Triciclos, and Polcura. He's also a United Nations high-level action climate champion. And at the COP28 event in the UAE just before the end of 2023, he served as the chair of food strategy on the non-state actor directive committee for the COP. So welcome, Gonzalo. And also with us is Deanna Cohen. Deanna is the co-founder and CEO of the Plastic Pollution Coalition, a global alliance that's working to stop plastic pollution and its toxic impacts. Fun fact, Diana is also an artist. We're going to get into that aspect of her work as well as what happens at the coalition later in the conversation. Really grateful to both of you for being here. I'm super excited to have the chance to have this conversation with you and excited for what I know I'll learn. We're going to focus, like I said, on plastics, but before we get to the specific topic, I'd just love our audience to hear a tiny bit more about each of you. So I thought I'd start, and I'm going to start with you, Deanna, by asking just how did you come to do this work and why do you keep doing this work? It's an ongoing, challenging process, I know. So Deanna, what brought you here and what kind of keeps you going? Where's the motivation?
Yeah, so I grew up in Southern California in Los Angeles, and I studied biology and art in university, and then began working. I would call myself a professional artist, but making work that I was showing in galleries and foundations and museums. But at some point, after working with paint and then brown paper bags that I was deconstructing, I started making work out of plastic bags and pieces of plastic bags that, again, I deconstructed and reassembled together. And so now I've been working with plastic bags and various forms of plastic pollution for the last 33 years. And I make 2- and 3-dimensional pieces out of it, and installations and sculptural pieces, and show them in galleries and foundations and museums. So I came to the work of co-founding Plastic Pollution Coalition as a visual artist who was working with this material really in a celebratory way of all of the colors and images and things that were printed on it, but then beginning to realize that there were some issues with the material, in that some of the pieces I was making after about 8 years started to fissure, and some of the bags and some of my pieces began to break into smaller pieces.
Mm.
And so I thought that that meant that it was ephemeral and organic like us, but in fact, it's not exactly that. Plastic is an interesting material, but it's a material that in a sense doesn't go away once we've created these different kinds of polymer chains out of it. So that led to co-founding Plastic Pollution Coalition, which we did with a small group of co-founders in 2009. And our first goal was to get people to call it what it is. That if we're talking about plastic and we're talking about plastic pollution, rather than calling it marine debris, litter, rubbish, waste, or garbage, to call it what it is. When we're talking about plastic, call it plastic. When it gets into the environment, it's plastic pollution. So that was really our first campaign. And our mission statement has evolved. We're turning 15 this year. We're in our 15th year of work. And we've seen a lot of wonderful traction and movement, which I can talk more to. But it's been a totally wild ride and wonderful for me just on a personal level to be able to use my artwork, also my personal experience in my family of my mother being diagnosed with breast cancer and dying very young. She died when she was 43. And being told as a teenager that the type of breast cancer she had was estrogen receptive, and now understanding that the chemicals that are used to make plastics are endocrine disruptors and can affect our bodies like a kind of synthetic estrogen. So it's kind of like my life went full circle from studying science and art to having a deeper understanding and now seeing the connections between the chemicals that are used to make plastic, what we're seeing with microplastics and the chemicals leaching into our food and beverages and beauty products and healthcare products and cleaning products, and then how that is impacting life on the planet. So,
well, so many things in there. I think fascinating where you started, that you were literally watching in the art that you were creating the breakdown of the plastics and thinking about what would happen after that. And then I'm so sorry to hear the story of your mom. And you're losing her at that incredibly young age. But very rounded introduction. Look forward to getting into more of those things. But Gonzalo, want to hear your voice and how you've ended up doing this work as well, please.
Thanks so much, and also my deep feelings with you, Diana, in terms of your loss. I'm a farmer, living and having grown in Chile, but also having lived in different countries in Latin America and in Europe. My background is all about agriculture, veterinary, and environmental science. I come from a family where sustainability is a lot grounded into our culture, and I decided to move into business. So I had the luck of becoming a CEO in a very early stage in my career, and for 10 years I run companies processing and packing and importing and exporting food from Chile, Argentina, Brazil, Spain, and very rapidly I realized that I was definitely part of the problem when putting a lot of packaging and many times waste into the hands of the consumers without any type of consideration on whether that would be a problem that could be easily or not, easily solved or not, right? And I realized that there was no incentive whatsoever at that point. I'm talking about more than 20 years ago, on how to design products and how to design packaging in a way that could be friendly with the environment. I had also a very particular personal moment with my younger daughter. I am a proud father of 3 amazing women at this point, but when she was the youngest, when she was 3 years old, she had also a very strong cancer. Luckily, she survived that cancer, but I have to recognize that that was a very important moment for myself, while recognizing that life can be very short. And I have to say that because at that period of time, I lost 2 of my closest friends in 2 accidents, and I realized that it's better for you to dedicate your time to things that are worth. And my decision, having already started the Purpura winery some years ago, 25 years ago, I decided at that moment to start this company called Triciclos. Funny, it's becoming 15 years old as well. We founded it in May 17th, 2009, and the year after, we realized that that's recycling day in the world, and we didn't know in the moment that we were signing the bylaws. So we're becoming 15 years old in this company that is dedicated to implement circular economy solutions in several countries in Latin America. And that has given us as a team many more opportunities and visions and capacity of positively influence that we could have ever thought. So, for example, it became the first certified B Corporation outside of North America. And through that, we started promoting the idea of B Corps as companies that are promoting the logic of triple impact. And through that, many more magical things happen, personally, organizationally, and probably also, as I will explain later, for at least a country like Chile.
Well, I love that we're going to get to hear about magical things that happened. And I also love that both of you, these connections between what's happened in your personal life, the purpose in your work, and stitching it all together. And I find that often in this field, right? That the people have been pulled to sustainability with a passion, and they want to serve and they want to solve. And you're both now running organizations doing that. Gonzalo, you started to introduce Triciclos, and I'd love to go farther. So, working on circular economy, recycling, I know some about the challenges of trying to build such systems, and they're immense. And so, maybe you can actually explain circular for people a tiny bit more in case we've got listeners who don't know what we mean by that. And then, can you give us an example? Bring it to life with a moment or a project that shows the impact that Triciclos is having on communities or the environment.
Perfect. So thank you for that. Circularity is all about stopping any element that we are nowadays throwing back to the environment and make it continue in the system, in the economy, as long as we can and with no harm, right? So, of course, the best way to do that is without generating any type of waste, and many times is a lot about, of course, reusing materials or repairing or sharing, right? And probably the last of those ideas is to recycle certain materials. We know that the recycling economy is still very small in terms of the solutions that we can provide. Yeah. So what we project in Triciclos is mostly the idea to think before buying, before consuming, before disposing. We say that waste is nothing but an error of design. So we're trying to generate all the time our capacity on thinking better when we're designing what do we obtain from nature, how do we process those materials, how do we design what we're needing. Many times design our thinking by avoiding to buy or use something that we don't need, right? And then, of course, the consumption phase, the disposal phase, and the design of public policy as well. Mm-hmm. So in all of those value chains, elements of the value chain, you can identify individuals and organizations. One of the groups of people that we are mostly connected to are streetway speakers, right? People that live in countries like Chile and many more that normally they live from trying to pick certain materials from waste that they can afterwards sell. And I just wanted to reflect on one individual that for me is very symbolic. Her name is Soledad Mella. She used to be a streetway speaker in a very poor neighborhood here in Santiago. We identified her back in 2012, and we trained her, but let me be honest on that sense. She knows much more than us, right? Yeah. So yeah, train her in terms of how to manage a recycling station. I will speak later about that. The type of recycling stations that we design and build. She started doing that. She became very, very successful. Then she started operating another 2, 3, helped her to buy a truck, started doing collecting systems. Later on, She became a consultant at the same time of our team. So let's say when a big consumer good company that is hiring our services, we go with engineers, we go with designers, and we go as well with streetway speakers that can tell the company, you know what you're putting into the market, for me as the individual at the final stage will try to collect that, is not useful because you're designing in an improper way, or there's no market for that, or for me it's too hard to manage, transport, whatever. So the knowledge that we're bringing for them allows the streetway speakers to then elevate to becoming also individuals that are training some very prepared. I've seen Soledad Mella training the first lady of the country. And then later on, she became the global representative of the streetway speakers in the plastic treaty that is being negotiated. She will be with us in the different meetings, as she's been into the first meeting in Punta del Este, Uruguay, in France, and in Nairobi. She's going around the world promoting the logic of integrating the streetway speakers into the treaty that is being negotiated, and therefore she reflects much more of the impact that we're willing to create as an organization.
I mean, amazing. And I think what this does for me is it underscores how incredibly important it is that as we look for environmental solutions, that we connect them to livelihoods. And you know, people need a way to work on these things and to meet the economic self-reliance part of the sustainability challenge at the same time as solving the environmental challenges. And that great story, great example. I love picturing her training the first lady and representing you in all these spaces now. Diana, another part of this that is so important is awareness raising and advocacy and lobbying for different policy change. I know that the Plastic Pollution Coalition has been really instrumental in raising awareness around this issue about the environmental impacts. Same question in a sense as I put to Gonzalo. Can you give us an example of where the work you've done has led to a tangible policy change, a shift in public perception? You know, how do you influence people's thinking around this issue?
Yeah, so when we co-founded our organization in 2009, probably around the same time Gonzalo was having his meeting to create his company, we identified the fact that people were not, again, calling this material what it is. And so our first campaign was our Refuse campaign. We took the model that's been promulgated by industry and created by industry to reduce, reuse, and recycle, the 3R model. And we added a fourth R onto the front, which is refuse single-use plastic, not good for your health, not good for your family. So refuse it whenever possible, reduce it, and reuse other materials you have, ceramic, glass, stainless steel, wood, all the beautiful things that we've handed down in our families that sometimes families only save for a special occasion or a special meal once a year, but really encourage people to embrace and utilize those reusable materials, which are hopefully non-toxic and biobenign. So things that we can use that are healthier for us, that can be washed or cleaned or put in the dishwasher and used thousands and thousands of times versus single use and plastic materials that are designed for a single use or to be thrown away. So that's really where we started. And we also started with this idea of calling it what it is. Again, calling it plastic pollution. So I would say that has been one of the greatest successes, which is in less than 15 years. We've moved culture and the world internationally and policymakers to utilize the language and implement the language of calling it plastic and calling it plastic pollution. So what we're currently seeing right now is a couple different pieces of federal legislation here in the US. One is the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. The other is the Right to Repair Act. So stop designing things with intended obsolescence and design things that are meant to either those materials be reused again or to continue fitting together so that the components can be taken apart and reshaped and reformed or to reuse. And then the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, a very thorough, expansive policy, that where we're working to support the infrastructure that needs to be brought back in order to reuse materials, in order to reuse glass, to sterilize it, to refill it, to reuse steel and other materials as well. So there are those two pieces at the federal level here in the US. And then at the international level, of course, we are all involved in drafting the UN Plastics Treaty.
Mm-hmm.
But Plastic Pollution Coalition has also created a tool. It's called the Global Plastic Laws Database. People can find that at globalplasticlaws.org if you're interested in utilizing the tool. And that aggregates policy from around the world. Because when we look at entire continents, Plastic Pollution Coalition is made up of organizations and businesses from 75 countries. So, and in the last, I'd say 5 years of our existence, the amount of businesses that have joined us has really, expanded. So we're about half and half now, businesses and nonprofits and organizations. And laws look different depending which continent, which country you're in. They look different coming from different cultures. They can even be different in different parts of the same state.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been really fun to be involved in that. And what started out very simply when we first created the first iteration of our website for Plastic Pollution Coalition in how to start a bag ban in your town, or how to start a polystyrene ban in your town. Those have expanded and grown and turned into the Global Plastic Laws Database. So that's exciting. And then an additional, we've created many projects that we're currently working on, but another one that's very exciting that is a collaboration with other coalition members and is overseen by the Food Packaging Forum, who are based out of Switzerland, is a tool we built called the UP Scorecard. upscorecard.org. It stands for Understanding Packaging Scorecard. And that is a tool that businesses can use to come in and do a comparison of the different materials, particularly for takeaway. We started out with cups, even paper cups, which have a certain percentage of plastic in them so that they won't leak. Just doing comparisons of that. But what I love about having been part of creating that tool is that we look at 6 different parameters. The 3 that are the most valuable and important to me are we look at climate impact.
Mm-hmm.
We look at plastic pollution, not by weight, but by quantity. And we look at chemicals of concern,
Mm-hmm.
which is something that people have not really been looking at. And I would also add to what Gonzalo was saying, that in our coalition, we also have coalition member groups like Chintan out of India who represent waste pickers and represent waste pickers' rights. But at the same time, I would say to you that while we work on personal behavior change, what we can do in our schools, what we can do in our place of work or as businesses, and also policy and legislation, I really ask people to consider why it falls to the waste pickers and why it falls to our children and future generations to clean up the mess that has been created by companies and corporations, using plastic as their primary material, either for their products or to package, again, their food, beverages, beauty products, healthcare products, cleaning products, etc. And oftentimes, I've even had like a shocking feeling when I walk into a bigger kind of chain store here in the United States and see that almost everything around me is made out of plastic.
Yeah, it's really, really jarring, isn't it?
And
Like
sorry, I would just add
swimming.
one more. I would add one more thought too, which is I don't think that the average person yet realizes that 99% of plastics are made out of fossil fuels and fracked and cracked gas and oil. It's made out of petrochemicals. So when you really realize that this is made out of the byproducts of processing those materials, and then these chemical additives, which have been identified as endocrine disruptors and bad for our health, are added to to basically plasticize the organic compound, the carbon source that we're using to make the plastic, you begin to see a bigger picture chain and realize that our using of this material, and I think we just took the wrong fork in the road at some point, because I think it's a valuable material, but we don't treat it as a valuable material, not yet.
Yeah, yeah. And what both of you have said, and particularly Deanna, as you took us through this, the breadth of the challenge here and what we need to do to find and circulate best practice laws and ways to advance policy, all the people up and down the chain who need to be informed and aware. Your point about, who we're leaving the problem with really resonated. I'm always find it incredibly disquieting when people in power today say, well, this next generation coming up, they're amazing, they'll solve it. And I think absolutely not fair. It's on us to do everything to solve it now and not leave it behind. And Gonzalo, maybe we can turn into some of the solutions that Triciclos is getting at least closer to. So from the breadth of all this, are there some innovations that you found most effective to engage at a business or consumer level that helps people do their part, but also maybe can kind of get their heads around this at a size that doesn't overwhelm them with the scale of the challenge?
Sure. So we started as practitioners developing solutions right right in the field. As I told previously, I packed food for more than 10 years, so I understand very well which type of polymer you use for different types of materials, and I know very well which one of them are easy to identify, potentially easy to bring back to the value chain as a raw material. So the first of our innovation was a recycling station. Let's imagine a 40-foot container converted into a recycling station. People listening to this this webinar can check online. If you put Triciclos and recycling station, you'll see the pictures of it. The recycling station became a way for us to validate that you can work your style of life while deciding better what to buy and what not to buy, and then identify the materials properly. And then, of course, when it comes to plastics, we opened up to, when it comes to the materials, we open up to 35 different types of material. When it comes to plastics, sometimes up to 12 different types of categories of plastics that we can receive, and then we can guarantee that those materials will be recycled. The way to guarantee that is that every recycling station is operated by 1 up to 7 people, depending on the volume, most of them being waste pickers that we train to become people that are serving. So they're providing a service and getting paid by the service, not only by the materials, because if the materials are being wasted, it's because we are not valuing them properly, and therefore many times those materials in the real economy are having negative residual value, right? It takes much more money to bring them into a recycling mechanism than what you're going to get paid for it. So it requires some level of subsidy, let's say, from the system. So we created these recycling stations. Those recycling stations and the network became the biggest recycling station network in Latin America, working in several countries. We have, through that, guaranteed the recycling of more than 50,000 tons, and we have served more than 7.5 million people that have brought their materials, not only for them to be recycled, but also to learn what did I buy when I bought this material? What is it, right? And the people serving in the recycling stations, mostly with through waste speakers, will train citizens in not only the way to guarantee the recyclability of those materials, but as I said, in order to purchase in a more responsible way. Those stations became also a big chunk of the extended producer responsibility legislation mechanism in Chile, and then expanding to other countries. So it became also part of the legislation, part of the regulation in the country on how to implement a mechanism that will really scale up the way to reduce the waste. Of course, absolutely complementing the mechanisms of collecting house by house. If you do right what we tell people to do, you can reduce your waste up to 90%. Of course, that includes the organic part as well, where we train people to do so also, and work with different municipalities. Then another part of that was related to how much knowledge was created around the station. So as I said, it's not only 50,000 tons that we have managed, but we have identified kilogram by kilogram, what was it, and how many times, as Diana said, you know that a material is potentially recyclable or not, and that descriptions, when packed in a system like the scorecard that Diana was referring to, allows us also to train companies and train legislators in a proper way. So one of the spin-offs of Triciclos is a consultancy team called Manuya that works specifically on that side. And then another team that is working very much related to the treaty and public policies being made all around the world. So as I said, not only Soledad, Mella as an example, but also a lot of our team are supporting different countries, including the small island states, on how to implement mechanisms that will reduce plastic pollution in the proper way. So at the end, as I said initially, we understand that waste is nothing but a design problem. We're trying to help people design their way of life, the way they consume, how do you operate in terms of the waste that you're generating, how you redesign the way you dispose that waste, and how all of that system is collaborating for companies to design and produce and sell products in a way that can be circular as much as possible. And then the same thing when it comes to regulation, whether local, national, or globally.
Amazing. I'm excited to look online and can kind of picture the modularity of the shipping container recycling stations, and just that they become a symbol, in the community that something's being done and something needs to change. And I wanted to touch, you mentioned that, waste is a design problem, and that phrase has been around for a long time, but I really liked how you connected it to not just the design of the thing, whatever the thing is, but to the design of how we live. And I think it's very much both parts, right? It's how we think about the thing and how we accept and use the thing, and whether we, to your point, Diana, use the good stuff all the time instead of only bringing it out on special occasions. How do we live with all this? Diana, I do want to come back to you and come back to you as an artist instead of as an advocate, although I'm sure the two are pretty fused in your life.
They are.
And given that bent and that background, just what role do art and creativity play in driving behavior change? So what do we learn from your perspective as an artist in particular as we think about trying to drive change on this challenge?
I would say that we were able to create Plastic Pollution Coalition because I'm an artist and we were working with other artists, professional athletes, musicians, actors, chefs, writers, filmmakers, people in the culture, not just in the United States, but around the world, who identified and saw that there was a problem and were interested in solutions. And I think what you find when you engage with the art community, with creatives, is that they're using creativity for advocacy and to help educate people, educate, connect, and advocate, which is what we do at Plastic Pollution Coalition, is a wonderful way to not just talk at people. And I would say you're absolutely right. My artwork and the work I do running Plastic Pollution Coalition are deeply intertwined with each other. When I'm invited to speak as an artist, I often use that platform to educate people around the issue. But something that I've only learned in the course of working with these materials and in creating the coalition and my journey as an artist, the things that I've learned include the fact that plastic pollutes us from extraction through manufacturing, production, if it's designed for single use, I fully agree with Gonzalo. We're dealing with a pretty massive design flaw, actually. And then it's also coming back and getting us again when it comes to waste management, which is kind of the downstream end of life, portion of this issue, which, I admire you, Gonzalo, for taking this on, because it's a Sisyphusian task. And particularly when you're working with plastics, it's a material that was never designed to be recycled. And plastics are still, unfortunately, not designed to be recycled. So even the numbers in the chasing kind of triangular arrows, they only identify the polymer type. They don't mean that anything can either be recycled or is being recycled, because that really depends on what's available in one's community. And we're seeing that such a small amount of plastics are recycled. And so that brings me again, as an artist and a person interested in science and biology and how the world works, it brings me to thinking about the fact that nature doesn't create any waste. All waste in nature has had an evolution process so that something has developed that utilizes that waste as an energy or a resource. And plastic is kind of this like strange conundrum. We've taken this material that planet Earth took thousands, if not millions of years, to create under the surface and the core from plants and animals and dinosaurs that went extinct, and we extract it and then we turn it into these colorful things. And when we design for single use or intentionally to have intentional obsolescence with it, it's really a design flaw. It's really a design flaw because we're not designing what happens to that afterwards. And it's been really unfortunate just in my lifetime to go from having lived in an apartment with my family where the milkman delivered milk in glass bottles and picked those up and sterilized them and refilled them locally, to a world where everything is kind of globally shipped all over the place. And the producers and the companies that make things somehow have become totally disconnected and no longer responsible for their packaging materials and their materials. And the one additional thing I would say is what I've come to learn, and really just learned this in the last 6 years, is that chain pollutes all of us, and particularly pollutes communities, rural, low-income communities, brown communities, Black communities, indigenous communities at a much higher rate than it is. I mean, it's polluting us all, but it at a much higher rate because those communities don't have the political power to say, no, don't build that refinery, that manufacturing plant, that incineration plant across the street from my neighborhood, across the street from my house or my school. They don't have the ability to stop it. And so you end up with sacrifice zones around the world. And it's that learning about all of that for me just in the last 5 years has made me angry, and it's made me redouble my effort to communicate this issue to people and to really work to empower and uplift and support companies that are doing the right thing so that we don't have to manage this in the same way. So to go to all of those upstream source points and look at ways that we can, as individuals make smarter choices, as business women and businessmen make smarter choices, implement that throughout our business chain, look at policies and legislation that we can get involved with, that we can support, and that we then can follow if we're in food services or own restaurants or, our big providers like around the world, Sodexo, Aramark, Compass at Google, all of these different companies that are providing and distributing food and resources to people. If we can change things in those, in the chain of those, that's key. And frankly, that's the direction we need to go, because all of this often either gets dumped into our environment, which we call landfilling, ends up in our waterways, streams, and the ocean, or it is burnt in some fashion, incinerated, waste to energy, waste to fuel. All these things sound great, but they pollute us all again and again and again. So, my goal is to recognize that we're part of nature and that we have the ability to think reusable, refillable, reduce the amount of materials that we're using, and really create a healthier, less toxic planet, and hopefully help balance the climate by not needing to manage and burn so much of this stuff at the end.
I mean, so many of these things are so deeply connected, and we came onto this session today to talk about plastic and plastic pollution, but we've connected it to community, we've connected it to livelihood, we've raised the incredibly important issues of just transition and environmental justice. And no one of these things, stands alone or will be solved alone. They've all got to tie together. Gonzalo and Diana, we're hitting that point where it's time for me to say thank you so much. This episode of Voices of Sustainability is going to be released on Earth Day 2024. So I wish you both, not just for this year, but for every year ahead and every day ahead, a happy Earth Day. I hope we'll have lots to celebrate based on your work and the work of other people who are pushing for change, pushing to make things better. People who are interested in the Voices of Sustainability chat series, you have obviously found this episode, but if you want to see or listen to other ones, they are all on the Zayed Sustainability Prize YouTube channel. And provide feedback to them about what's working and which conversations you'd like to hear otherwise in the future. Gonzalo, Diana, thank you so much. Bye for now.
Thanks so much, Mark. Happy Earth Day.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to meet you, Gonzalo. Thank you, Mark. Nice to meet
Likewise.
you. Thank you for including us.
Diana.